Despite being the hardest hit by COVID-19, the U.S. is severing all ties with the World Health Organization. Its primary role is to lead the response to global health issues like the pandemic. But President Trump has been critical of the organization's handling of the virus, and the U.S. is the biggest financial supporter. So now other countries, including Canada, could be asked to fill the gap. Here's Couteur.
They have failed to make the requested and greatly needed reforms.
U.S. President Donald Trump had threatened to sever ties with the World Health Organization and withhold funding. Now, it's official.
We will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization and redirecting those funds.
Those funds total $550 million Canadian, or 15% of the WHO's overall budget. Canada's annual contribution is $17 million. Now, we added another $17.5 million in response to COVID-19, and we could be sending more money to the WHO.
And the WHO did put out a further appeal recently for an additional $1.4 billion, and we are considering what an appropriate response would be. So there is likely to be an additional response to the WHO, but will it fill the gap that the U.S. is leaving? Not just Canada alone.
Germany's health minister tweeting, "The WHO needs reform," adding the EU should engage more financially. It's unclear if European countries will step up, but many countries, including Canada, agree that reform will only come from a post-pandemic review of the WHO's response to COVID-19. While our government isn't commenting directly on the U.S.'s decision to cut ties with the organization, Canada's position is clear.
We would rather be part of that process, pushing for more transparency, pushing to have, a better, stronger response, as opposed to taking ourselves out of the conversation.
The president of the European Commission is also calling for global cooperation and solidarity, while asking the U.S. to reconsider its decision to leave the WHO. Couteur, Global News, Ottawa.
Still ahead, the crisis in Hong Kong and the British offer to its former colony. A handful of Beijing supporters marched to the U.S. consulate in Hong Kong today to demonstrate against what they call American interference. Yesterday, President Trump said the U.S. would end preferential economic treatment of Hong Kong. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says China's tighter grip on Hong Kong violates the one country, two systems framework. Beijing agreed to that when it took back the former colony. Goomansingh reports.
Fear over China strengthening its grip on Hong Kong has hit another flashpoint.
To take my last breath, I will come out and fight for freedom. They are trying to suppress as much as possible.
The full scope of the legislation is not known, but world leaders say it reaches into areas seen as protected. China agreed when in 1997 the UK handed over control of Hong Kong that for 50 years it would retain a capitalist economy, the justice system would be maintained, as well as human rights and freedoms. As a pressure tactic, millions in Hong Kong with or eligible for British national overseas passports could be granted extended UK stays.
Remove that 6-month limit and allow those BNO passport holders to come to the UK and to apply to work and study for extendable periods of 12 months, and that would itself provide a pathway to future citizenship.
The pandemic quelled protests, but for a year there have been large and at times violent clashes between pro-democracy groups and officials. The current government is seen as beholden to China.
If I can sacrifice for Hong Kong, I would do so. This is my home. What I have, this place gave me. I will fight on to the last day.
China claims it is protecting national security. But the truth is that Hong Kong was secure and prosperous as a free society.
The United States, which has been at odds with China, hit the country with new sanctions and will revoke Hong Kong's special status in terms of American trade and travel. As expected, China hit back.
美方认清形势。
The spokesperson for the foreign ministry saying if the U.S. is determined to harm China's interests, China will take necessary countermeasures, adding no country has the right to interfere in China's internal affairs. Like many political issues involving China, the new security legislation is being presented differently. Chinese state media interviews talk about the need for the changes in Hong Kong and how they're welcomed. That is not the message from those who risk their safety on the streets this week.
We must stand up and fight and to let Beijing know that we will never surrender.
Justin Trudeau is calling for calm and a path that, quote, allows for prosperity in a way that citizens in Hong Kong expect. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.